Welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of college basketball. A tough loss to swallow on senior night against the Wisconsin Badgers as the defense still searches for answers. But without further ado, let's run it. The final game of the regular season ends in a final score of Wisconsin 97, Purdue 93. It was a brutal end to these seniors' regular season careers, but their story isn't over yet. This final chapter is still being written. It's going to be hard to overcome the stain that is five home losses in one of the best arenas, atmospheres, and home court advantages of in all of college basketball. This game was just an offensive masterclass from the jump. It started with a lawyer three to get the Boilers started. Unfortunately, Wisconsin got going early and often right back with a sneak peek of the barrage that was to come with a three from Biliauskas on the Badgers' second possession. Um, we just struggled majorly to guard Wisconsin's bigs. And quite honestly, everybody, I guess, especially from outside in this game, which has been far too common of a theme with Purdue's defense recently. But in this game against this team, the problem is they can score from anywhere. They can shoot from the outside with anybody. Any single player that shot a three in this game for Wisconsin made at least one. And the only guy with one was Boyd. Um, but early and often, the Badgers did it through a lot of pick and pop with both Biliauskas and Rapp mostly. Those two combined for a absolutely disgusting 8 of 13 from deep. It just shows how dangerous Wisconsin can be when they're on. Like I said, everybody can shoot. And if you can't guard the pick and roll slash pick and pop well, they will torch you if they're shooting well that day. You've seen Wisconsin have some amazing performances with, 15 plus threes against Purdue, Michigan, Michigan State, and Illinois through all of those wins. But then you also see them, have some very poor shooting performances in games like their loss to Oregon. Um, and it's just inconsistency. Now, again, playing up to their competition is exactly what you want to do when it comes to playing in March. Now they have to get to the point of playing some of that upper level competition, so they have to show they can do that against some of the more mid-range teams in the Big Ten tournament and whoever they get matched up with in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But I digress. Back to this game specifically, I think another massive thing to note is they did all of this without Nolan Winter, who was their third leading scorer, who had 18 and 10 when these teams played earlier this year in Madison. Clough did his best to hedge in this game, whether it was a hard hedge or just kind of push them out horizontally. Some of that was purposeful, and some of that was just what Boyd was able to do to the hedge. And it shook us a lot. It put us in a lot of really bad rotations. Clough tried to get back as much as possible, but when they dragged him that far outside, it just became essentially a warm-up shot for whatever big was there. They got at least a couple from essentially the dead top of the key there, where the pass back and our rotations are not strong enough, and our help defense in terms of being able to split two guys and be there on the shot. And then if multiple passes more come, trying to be able to rotate through that and scramble, it's not what it needs to be able to be at least moderately effective in that style of defense. When we get pulled into those rotations and we get pulled into those scramble drills, it's a matter of seconds, only a couple seconds most of the time, before the opponent is going to find an open shot, whether it was in this game finding a lot of open threes, or we scramble to find open threes and end up giving up a wide open layup, which I'll talk about in one of the stretches here in the first half. But the crazy thing was, despite the early shooting and a bad turnover leading to an and one from Blackwell, we really held them at bay pretty well through the first 7 minutes. And again, you've seen this happen in a lot of games recently, where we get off to this good start, mainly led because or just by coincidence, Clough being in the game for us and doing some amount of positive things. Then we go to some of our rotations or subs, and things start to fall apart. Now, they didn't fall apart quite as hard in this game as they did in certain other ones. Big part of the reason is because we were still able to score a lot throughout pretty much all stretches of this game. There's kind of no way for you to go put up 93 and have significant stretches without scoring. But like I said, those first 7 minutes were great. We caused a couple turnovers. We protected the rim on some of Boyd's drives. We looked like a semi-competent defense. Those turnovers and forcing at least, more out of rhythm threes led us to go on an 11-0 run to bring the lead out to 20-13 as we hit that 13-minute mark. Mackey was electric. The momentum was massively swung in our favor. But in the midst of the cheers and a turnover that went out of bounds just in front of Purdue's bench, Painter made his age-old mistake. He pointed at Jacobson and sent him to the scorer's table. And like a broken record, things started to fall apart, especially on the defensive end, but mostly on the defensive end, as soon as Daniel Jacobson checked into the game. I can't blame him for all our defensive issues because, I mean, we gave up 97 points. It wasn't 97 points scored all on or because of DJ. But you can't ignore the stretch of defense that we had after he checked into this game. Jacobson did get an alley-oop from Braden in his first possession on offense, and that brought our lead up to 9, which was our largest lead of the game. But after that, as soon as we got on the defensive end, things started to go downhill quickly. With a 9-point lead, Wisconsin would go on a streak of 11 straight possessions with Jacobson on the floor with scores, whether it be baskets or free throws. 11 straight possessions with Jacobson on the floor with scores over 2 separate spans in the first half. Let's do a little film study. First, Jacobson fails to bring in the defensive rebound that was nearly in his hands. That leads to a kick out and open 3 for Rapp. The next possession, Boyd just runs straight around Jacobson's hedge, causing a collapse, kick out, and then they just swing the ball until Blackwell finds himself with Jacobson on him on the wing, actually more near the corner, and torches him with a sidestep 3. Creates maybe 6 to 8 feet of space. Next up, Blackwell gets the ball in the wing, refuses a screen, and Jacobson just can't get back in front, so he makes a swinging block attempt and sends him to the line, where he thankfully or luckily only makes 1 of 2. Then Bieliauskas hits a skip pass over to Boyd for a much too open 3 because we couldn't figure out our ball screen rotations again. Then Jacobson subs out after Purdue's lead goes from 9 to 3 in that span, doesn't come back until the 5:42 mark of the first half, with the Badgers up 34-32. First possession, Boyd blows past Jacobson again, causes Benter to crash the baseline to help. Boyd kicks out to Rapp for an open corner 3. DJ did get an offensive rebound, get fouled, and hit both free throws on the offensive end. But man, I couldn't believe he couldn't get the putback to go down because it just felt like he got such a clean look, just like literally a foot away from the rim, and his hands just failed him in terms of trying to get a clean grasp on the ball to at least tip it up over the rim. But back to the other end, Jacobson holds Bieliauskas' arm while trying to go after the defensive rebound, which puts the Badgers over the limit, and he shoots 1-and-1 and makes both free throws. So once again, even when we're able to get a miss, still couldn't corral on a defensive rebound without fouling there. Then DJ gets fouled on a screening action, which sends him to the free throw line for a 1-and-1, which he makes the first, misses the second, and quite frankly, we got a pretty lucky offensive rebound as it found its way to Benter, who got it to Omer for a kick-out 3. A small positive in that stretch. And again, some of the reason we were able to stay in the game during this bad stretch was the fact that we were still able to hit, a decent amount of shots. But back to the other end once again, even when we're able to force a miss from Blackwell, we couldn't secure the rebound, goes out of bounds for Wisconsin, and the baseline out of bounds play turns into a way too open 3 for Carrington because Fletch just got lost for a split second thinking that Carrington was going to the top of the key, and he flashes to the corner, open bucket. Next, again, we have a failed hedge turned into a switch, which messes up our rotations entirely, leaving Jones under the basket, whoever the heck that even is, for a literally the most open layup that he's gotten all season and will get. Then we have a missed shot on our end. Bieliauskas breaks out immediately, with DJ taking an extra second to take a weak swipe at the ball, and that then forces Fletch to have to pick up Bieliauskas in the paint on the other end because DJ is just that far behind as Wisconsin brings the ball down, leaving him to pick up goddamn John Blackwell, who just calmly takes it out, drives right past him, and kicks to the corner for another wide open 3 for Rhodey. Then again, Wisconsin uses ball screen action to get us moving, rotating, leaving Jacobson just a little lost down there trying to guard whoever's closest to him, ends up abandoning his man, but it doesn't really matter because the kick to Blackwell lines up another three from the top of the key. The following possession, our ball screen switching leads Fletcher to try to front Rapp in the post with no backside help and gives up a foul trying to hold his ground, and Rapp makes both free throws. And finally, after that, Wisconsin's last two possessions of the half end in misses, and DJ actually gets a post-up bucket off of a jump hook that actually looks solid because he didn't fade as he shot it. He somewhat stood his ground. In Jacobson's first stint, over 3.5 minutes, Purdue gives up 10 points. And in his second stint of the last 5:42 of the half, Purdue gives up 18 points. That's 28 points given up in a little over 9.5 minutes of Daniel Jacobson being on the floor. 11 straight possessions with some type of score, with Wisconsin scoring 2.5 points per possession over that span. I don't care how good on offense we're playing. You just can't keep up with that. And we didn't. We gave them a 5-point lead at half after being up 9 at the 13-minute mark before the collapse. And once again, this goes back to what I mentioned going into this game and after the Northwestern game. Shorten the rotation. And we kind of did that because Jakari only plays 4 first half minutes with his only recorded stat being a turnover. -5 in his 4 minutes. Only thing they couldn't do out of the essentially plan that I laid out for them was to keep Clough and TKR on the floor for over 30 minutes because of fouls. That's why you end up seeing 13 minutes out of Daniel Jacobson. Jacobson comes in for the second time in the first half only because Clough gets his second foul, and they feel that they have to play Jacobson instead of going small with both Bieliauskas and Rapp in the game, with both of those guys being 6'10". It would be really difficult for us to try to go small and be short in both the center and power forward positions with TKR at 6'9", and that might even be a little generous. And then you would be playing Jack Benter at 6'6". And TKR has to sit for multiple stretches throughout the second half because he picked up his third foul with 14 minutes to go. And his fourth foul with 7 minutes to go. And that fourth foul was huge. And in my opinion, an absolutely horrible call by the officials. They say that TKR pushes Rapp into Lawyer on a screen, but you look at the replay, clear as day, TKR did not push or extend one bit. Purdue had just hit back-to-back buckets to pull within two as soon as TKR comes back into the game just like a minute and a half prior. Now TKR has to sub out after getting his fourth foul. Rapp goes to the line because they're in the bonus, hits one of two, and instead of Purdue getting the ball back down two, with TKR playing with only 3 fouls and Austin Rapp picking up his fourth foul instead, now Wisconsin goes up 3. TKR has to sit for another 3 minutes after coming back to spark that 4-point swing. And it just sucks that you can't challenge a foul call because that would have been the easiest challenge ever. That felt like a huge swing, even though it didn't end up with Wisconsin going on like a crazy run afterwards because TKR comes back in, the momentum swinging towards Purdue. You get Rapp with another foul who has been playing super well. Rapp ends up with 17 points on the game. You get him out of the game with 4 fouls. I would love to see, again, it's a massive game of ifs, but I would have loved to see how different that final stretch of the game could have gone if TKR never leaves the floor there. But it's all a game of wishes, prayers, and ifs. But talking about the defensive scheme, this has been, a huge talking point with all of our, quite frankly, defensive fails over the course of these last 2 months. But in this game, you saw Purdue actually attempt 3 different defensive styles throughout the game. They still did their high, hard hedge for a good majority of the game, which, as you saw, really didn't work once again because Blackwell and Boyd, with Boyd especially, able to pull Clough out on those hedges, even if he's able to stop him. And that's how you saw a lot of those pick and pops happen early, where you get Bieliauskas, you get Rapp open at the top of the key or on the wing, depending on where they're running these screens. because we just can't get our main on-ball defender back fast enough to avoid there being this huge gap to where that pass goes back to the big and Clough tries his best to make it back and get a solid contest on it, but he's just too far away. They get warm-up shots because of it, and so many of those threes that were made by their bigs. I mean, I mentioned their bigs made 8 threes combined from those two starting bigs because they were just so open. They really were not all that contested for most of those shots. Those ones at least. We did make some contests on some of those threes, and they made some damn tough buckets throughout the course of this game. You have to tip your cap to that. But it's the open ones that you have to be frustrated with, and you have to look at and be like, what could we have done different? Well, we tried some different things. So when that high hedge wasn't working out very well from us, we at occasionally certain points tried a couple possessions of like pure switch, and that didn't work well either. We got pretty torched on those as well because once again, the same issues that I was mentioning in Northwestern and what Illinois was able to do us with Wagler, when you get switches and you could get guards or even at just more athletic forwards on the outside with Clough or Jacobson, it's food. It's just food for them. Whether it turns into them shaking the bigs and taking a shot from the outside, or just straight out blowing by him for a layup or blow by and help comes and you kick out for an open three. So many of those different possessions, those different types of reactions happened all throughout the game because we just couldn't stay in front. Quite frankly, whether it was the big or whether it was our guards, we just could not stay in front. And our help defense and our rotations just couldn't stop open threes. But the one thing that we did attempt was we did actually go to some drop coverage late in this game. First off, the one thing that I will say is that Joe Jackson from Feed the Post slash Boilers in the Stands covered this in length, going through a lot of these styles of play and what Wisconsin did to Purdue and how we tried to change things up on Boilers in the Stands, on Brags in the Stands channel specifically. So go check that out for a true deep analysis on the different coverages. But I wish we would have attempted more of the drop coverage on Boyd's screen specifically because you saw us go to that a little bit late in the game, and they may have still gotten a lot of buckets on the drop coverage, but we made them work for it so much more, and we made it so much more difficult on Boyd specifically. Um, he's not nearly as good of a shooter as Blackwell and a lot of those other guys, so if you force him into drop and say, if you want to try to take this pull-up three or this pull-up mid-range jumper over Clough with a guy trailing, cool. We'll take a tough two, as well as the fact that Boyd is an incredibly strong left-handed player. If you force him right and play that drop coverage, again, as much as possible, because you saw them adapt to various different things, but when at all possible, try to force him right because he did not look nearly as comfortable, nearly as dynamic of a playmaker or scorer if you send him to that right side and don't allow him to just go immediately around the defender. Force him to try to go into Clough, go into Jacobson, score over those guys. Um, because quite frankly, in that coverage, it took Boyd making multiple really tough baskets or just working way harder to try to get to the basket. To get some of those buckets late. And again, I will take tough contested twos, whether it's a driving layup that, either we are making a really good contest or, there was at least one where we didn't get as good of a contest, but he still had to make a tough full speed, layup going around the left side. I will take that any day over these warm-up threes to a team that is shooting over 50% on 30 plus attempts. There was one play specifically where you could see both ways and the differences of how comfortable and uncomfortable Boyd was in certain situations. We got Boyd going right off of a screen. Clough stays in drop. Boyd doesn't even attempt to attack. He goes nowhere. But they immediately go into a rescreen with Boyd going left. Now Clough tries to hedge high, completely misses. it essentially sets a second screen for Omer to try to get around. Boyd gets to the rim far too easily with Clough now nowhere near the rim to try to contest. That was the one where I mentioned, it was still a full speed, pretty tough layup with Omer trying to get back to contest it. Our help really just wasn't there in terms of trying to make a contest, probably because if we really did step in front of him, he probably would have just kicked out for another open three. But again, that drop coverage made him reconsider. It made them go to a rescreen, and I wonder what it would have been like you if Clough goes drop in that second screen as well. Would he have tried to pull up for a three? I mean, Boyd ended up 1 for 3 from three on the game. He was the only player that shot a three and only made one. Everybody else had two or more. Um, so I kind of wish we would have tried to force Boyd to, beat us from the outside. He loves getting to the rim. He loves getting to the free throw line. Um, so I don't know. It felt like both of Clough and Jacobson would have benefited individually, and our team defense as a whole would have benefited overall in most of these games if we just committed to a solid drop coverage. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't give up a lot of buckets, but we certainly would give up a lot less open threes. And again, I'll take twos over threes, and a lot of teams are not nearly as comfortable shooting in the mid range or shooting pull-up threes off of these ball screens when we go drop coverage. Some teams would, but a lot of teams wouldn't. And I feel like against some of these teams, that would be a much, much better strategy than trying to force our bigs who just cannot high hedge to go out there and make themselves vulnerable, get themselves in foul trouble, trying to bump some of these ball handlers and then also be away from the rim for rim protection and away from the rim for rebounding. It just feels like there's so many issues that we've dealt with that could be somewhat remedied. It's not going to be an end all fix, but it would remedy so much of the little issues that we deal with across so many different games. But I don't know. We'll see if they choose to adopt that more because this was the first time that I've seen them actually attempt to go to it a little bit. And I think it was just because that's how horrible our defense was doing at the time. But we'll have to see as these final games wrap up of the Big Ten tournament and inevitably the NCAA tournament, regardless of how far we go in either. But heading over to some of the individual stats, let's start with our seniors. Braden Smith plays 37 minutes, ends up with 20 points on 8 of 18 shooting, 2 for 7 from three, 2 for 2 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 9 assists, 0 turnovers, adding on 2 steals and a block. He had some pretty open missed shots, missed opportunities that you'd love to see fall in an ideal world. But other than that, I mean, it's a pretty great game, pretty fantastic game. 9 assists to 0 turnovers. He was in control the whole way. He didn't let anything bother him, anything shake him. He made a lot of the, best decisions throughout the course of the game. A massive reason why we end up having such a great offensive game. And the fact that he added on 2 steals and a block, that block in the corner on Blackwell was massive. I was kind of astonished how solid of a block it was. He didn't just tip it. Um, I mean, he did it. He did it all in this game. He did his best to step up on the defensive end when a lot of things clearly were not working. And those steals that he ended up with, and we'll talk about Fletch here next, but those two guys, the steals that they ended up getting were massive fuel in the two like 9-0 and 13-0 runs that we went on in this game that kept us in this game, that got us those leads that we did get. So amazing by him. Moving on to Fletcher, this was one of his best overall complete games of the season, possibly his career, because you don't typically see a lot out of Fletcher Loyer on the defensive end, and he stepped up in this one. He ends with 23 points on 8 of 13 shooting, 6 for 9 from three, 1 for 1 from the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 steals. I mean, he just had fantastic shooting on some tough big moment shots, including that last three, which was crucial for us at the time, and also was the three that set the record for him becoming the program's all-time leader in 3-point makes over Carson Edwards. And the fact that he was able to take a massive charge on the defensive end and get those 2 steals this was, I think, his best defensive performance of his career outside of the offensive side. And obviously, he had an amazing offensive side as well. He would not go down without a fight. So, massive respect to Fletcher Lawyer in terms of doing whatever he could within his possible, within his abilities to, make winning plays in this game. Moving on to the last of the big three, TKR. He ends up with 17 points on 7 of 14 shooting in just 23 minutes. He was 3 for 5 from the free throw line with 3 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 turnovers, but also ends up with a block. He was relatively even scoring in both halves. It wasn't quite, some of the things that we've seen in the past where he struggles majorly in the first half and goes nuclear in the second half. But he still does end up with those 3 turnovers that were just stemming from a couple of iffy decisions on both shot attempts and just where he was trying to get on the floor. Some of those weird shot attempts were kind of ugly, and I get that he is confident in his ability. The one where he did finally spin back over his right shoulder, but tried to put it up with his right hand. He was kind of too close to the baseline for it to be a relatively good angle for him to get that shot off. Um, but I mean, you can't really be that upset with 17 points in 23 minutes. But the basis of it is I think he could have helped us a lot more on the boards than 3 rebounds in his 23 minutes if he was just able to stay on the floor more. And again, those fouls were brutal. He ends up with 4 fouls in the game, and some of those coming in crucial times that I mentioned earlier. That fourth foul will always be a massive what if for me in this game. Um, but 17, 3 and 3 with a block, the fact he was able to get a block, not his best game, but nowhere near his worst by any means. Moving on to Clough, he was our biggest positive of the game. On the stat sheet, he only gets 10 points in 27 minutes, but 3 of 4 shooting. More importantly, 4 for 5 from the free throw line. So for him to be able to knock down 80% of his free throws were big. But he also comes up with 8 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 turnovers. But he had 3 blocks. It's a season high for blocks for him. And 3 of his rebounds were offensive rebounds. So um, he was our biggest positive, as I mentioned, +5 in his 27 minutes. But once again, he couldn't stay on the floor because of fouls. That second foul that caused us to put Jacobson back in that first half was just a stupid illegal screen, and it wasn't like an absolutely egregious screen. They just kind of took issue to him sticking his leg out a little bit farther than they deemed legal and necessary. And it's those type of things that he needs to know that he cannot risk because we need him in this game. We need our starting front court to be the dominant force, whether it be scoring, especially rebounding, um, and just solid presences on the defensive end, whether they're being shot blockers or not. And they were shot blockers in this one. We had 4 blocks between those two this game. That's fantastic. Somehow that comes on our worst defensive performance of the season, but it is what it is. Um, Moving on to CJ, he was still a net zero without him scoring very much. He plays 29 minutes, which I was, happier with, but he only ends up with 5 points on 2 of 7 shooting, 1 for 3 from three. More importantly, he does end up with 5 rebounds and an assist. So 2 of those rebounds being offensive. So he's continuing to, make more and more of an effort to be active on the rebounding end. And I think that was huge, especially with TKR only ending up with 3 rebounds. But once again, on the offensive side for him, he's just kind of struggled consistency wise. He has nuclear games like the Northwestern game, and then he'll have games like this where he just isn't able to be quite as on. And I would love to see a little bit more consistency out of him. And we'll see if we're able to get more out of him like that down the stretch. But as long as he's still able to be a solid force on the defensive end, whether he's getting steals or just being, a competent on-ball defender like we need him to be, he's still going to be very valuable to have on the court. And it's shown by the fact that with him out there, he was still a net zero plus minus, despite he himself not scoring all that much. Um, Biggest problem is the bench was all negatives. The starters were all net zero or positive. Benter was -2 in 17 minutes. Meyer -11 in 14 minutes. Jacobson, -9 in his 13 minutes. And Jakari Harris, I mentioned earlier, was -5 in just 4 minutes. Even on one of our best scoring performances of the season, our bench just could not provide any real positive minutes. And it was different reasons for each guy. For Jacobson, it was the fact that he struggled so much on the defensive end that no matter how much we were scoring on offense, he was still going to end up in the negative. Kind of same goes for Meyer, except for the fact that he got more shot opportunities and just couldn't really knock too many of them down. He does get 7 points, but on 3 of 7 shooting and 1 for 4 from three. If he's able to knock down even one more of those threes, it's, massive different performance for him and the way that you look at that stat line. For Benter, he's still struggling on the defensive end. Once again, maybe it's just because, in this game when he's playing the four, he was severely outmatched size-wise. But he's not rebounding nearly as well as he used to be. He's not scoring nearly as well. I mean, he was 1 for 2 with both of those being threes. So 1 for 2 from three, not going to be all that upset about. 2 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal and a turnover. So he had a bit more of a complete stat line, but again, it's just not super valuable, super meaningful minutes like he was earlier on, kind of before Big Ten play, especially when he was knocking threes down at a super high clip. But moving on to some of the team stats, I mean, we had 15 more possessions. We go 34 for 67, good for 51%. They go 29 for 52 for 56%. So 67 to 52 overall shots. The biggest thing is they just were more efficient. They hit 7 more threes. They were 18 for 34. 18 for 34 is insane. That's 53% when you shoot over 33s in a basketball game. I'm not sure if that will ever happen to Purdue again while I'm watching them. I don't think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think this has ever happened to Purdue before this game. I would have to go way back into scoring archives in some of these games, but this was literally Purdue's worst defensive performance in decades. I think since the 80s or 90s, what I saw in terms of giving up the 90 something points with as many points per possession as Wisconsin got. It was insanity. They're also able to get to the free throw line 24 times and go 21 for 24. Our fouls absolutely came back to bite us. It was pretty even on the fouls. We had 18, they had 19. But they take advantage of their free throws more. They only missed 3, we missed 5. We were 14 for 19 from the free throw line, good for 74%, which is quite frankly right at our average as a team. But yeah, I mean, we did everything else better than them except for shooting, and specifically 3-point shooting. They shot more and they made more threes. That's what it came down to, because the rebounding battle, we won that significantly. We won 34 to 22. It was pretty even on the defensive end, actually. It was 18 to 15 on the defensive end, but we won the offensive rebounding battle 16 to 7. We got 16 offensive rebounds. Fletcher Loyer, Omer Meyer, and Jakari Harris were the only players to not get an offensive rebound in this game. 1 from TKR, 3 from Clough, 2 from CJ, 2 from Braden, 3 from Jacobson, and 1 from Benter. And that kept us in the game. Us getting those more opportunities led us to be able to score over 90 and stay toe-to-toe with them until the end. We had 20 assists on 34 made field goals, which is a little lower percentage than usual. We had 7 turnovers to their 8, 5 steals to their 4, 5 blocks to their 1. We were a rim protecting team for once. I still can't get over that aspect of all of this. But I don't know. All in all, it's just such a tough way for an amazing class of seniors to go out regular season wise. They fought their asses off. Unfortunately, we still just can't figure out the defensive side of the ball against good to elite pick and roll teams. And that's the basis of what got us today for almost all 40 minutes, combined with truly elite shooting. My eyes are on the coaching staff right now. I have so much more I could say about this team, this defensive scheme, the personnel, the adjustments, but I want them to think long and hard over these couple of days until our first Big Ten matchup in this Big Ten tournament. and see some actual fundamental change on how we approach the defensive side of the ball. Until then, I will save my long-winded rants for the postseason. Lord knows I've already talked enough in this video. But coming up next, we end up with a double bye as the seventh seed in the Big Ten tournament, set to play the winner of Indiana and either Northwestern or Penn State on Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. My money's on Northwestern, but we'll have to see. We've beaten all three of those teams already, but I gotta say, it would be real interesting to get a third round of Purdue versus IU in the postseason, with IU trying to save their season and play their way into the NCAA tournament, and Purdue trying to start some major momentum going into the final stage of these seniors' careers. But we'll just have to wait and see. But that's all I've got for today. Despite the outcome and the disappointment, there is still a major opportunity for momentum building heading into Selection Sunday for the Boilermakers. Stay tuned for these electric games throughout the week and keep an eye out for recaps as soon as I can get them out to you. But if you want more from us, like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, I'm out.